Americans have long seen their soul, their failures, and their triumphs through their writers. No other country has produced such a noble body of literature as the United States. Hello, I'm Jane Kasmarek, and welcome to Great American Authors Since 1650. We shall see in the first episode that even before the country became an independent nation, its writers were discovering a unique and new voice, distinctive from its old world roots. And we shall see in less than 100 years after its founding in 1776, Ralph Waldo Emerson and Edgar Allan Poe had succeeded in perfecting that uniquely American voice. "50 years after the founding of the first colony at Jamestown in 1607, the country's first poet turned out to be an educated woman from England. She was Anne Bradstreet.
As more and more men and women arrived in the colonies, a mysterious change was taking place. A change that affected not only the people, but the colonies themselves. It was a change that would make it possible for the fledgling colonies to survive. This change was the emergence of a unique American character, an independent woman character. And the first person to give expression to this new American woman identity was Anne Bradstreet. Anne Bradstreet was born in England and was part of a group of Puritan separatists who fled persecution in England so that they could establish a new independent settlement in the New World and worship free from the restrictions of the Church of England. Well-read and educated, she arrived at Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1630 as an 18-year-old newlywed. At first, Bradstreet disliked America. She loved to read, and there were no libraries in the colonies. The early homesteads were stark with few amenities, and there was little time for intellectual pursuits. However, Anne soon discovered life in New England was simple and rewarding. The Puritan faith sustained her and became a source of comfort. She raised 8 children in her new home, all the while composing poetry between her daily chores. Her poetry, like Anne herself, reflected the change in colonial women as they began to embrace what would become the independent American woman.
By night, when others soundly slept, and had at once both ease and rest, my waking eyes were open kept, and so to lie I found it best. I sought him whom my soul did love. With tears I sought him earnestly. He bowed his ear down from above. In vain I did not seek or cry. My hungry soul he filled with good. He in his bottle put my tears. My smarting wounds washed in his blood, and banished thence my doubts and fears. What to my Savior shall I give, who freely hath done this for me? I'll serve him here whilst I shall live, and love him to eternity.
When her first volume of poetry, The 10th Muse, lately sprung up in America by a gentlewoman of those parts, was published in London in 1650, Bradstreet gained the title of America's first poet. Bradstreet's poetry depicted the personal lives of the pioneer women, women well known for their tenacity and hard work. Women who were breaking new ground, learning they were smart enough and strong enough to do a man's work. This change was expressed in Bradstreet's poem on Queen Elizabeth.
Now say, have women worth, or have they none? Or had they some, but with our queen is it gone? Nay, masculines, you have taxed us long, but she, though dead, will vindicate our wrong. Let such as say our sex is void of reason know, 'tis a slander now, but once was treason.
Anne Bradstreet died in 1672 in Andover, Massachusetts. Frontierswoman, poet, mother of 8 children, Anne Bradstreet expressed the transformation from English housewife and servant to independent American woman.
Anne Bradstreet was a member of that rebellious group of religious separatists who settled Massachusetts Bay Colony. Cotton Mather published a history of the first 50 years of that colony in The Ecclesiastical History of New England.
With the dawn of the 18th century, the Massachusetts Bay Colony was in transition from a simple society whose survival was based in large part on strict religious doctrines, to a new kind of civilization, one of tolerance and freedom. The new land that would eventually become the United States of America was transforming the inhabitants as they broke from the ways and views of Old England. Cotton Mather was a pivotal figure in that transition. In 1702, Cotton Mather published his magnum opus, Magnalia Christi Americana, the great achievement of Christ in America. The book was a history of the first 50 years in New England and marked the midpoint of the country's first major ideological transition. Its author, Cotton Mather, was like the country, a man in transition and the first American to be recognized as a Renaissance man. Mather was born in 1663. Preceded by his father and grandfather in the ministry, he too became a clergyman. In the early years, he was a strict religious leader and even helped initiate the Salem witch trials. Later, he would condemn the killing of presumed witches. He embraced the principles of John Locke and Sir Isaac Newton and saw scientific inquiry as a way of understanding God's creation. He helped form America's own version of Christianity. Like most Massachusetts colonists, he was a Puritan, but he drew upon the experience of living in the New World to shape an American version of Christianity that differed greatly from his Calvinist forebears and the Church of England. Mather's Puritan society advocated the simplicity of doing good and an ecclesiastical experience of God. Like the Renaissance men who would follow him, such as Jefferson and Franklin, Mather was interested in natural science and was an early advocate of the smallpox vaccination, which placed the pox virus under the skin. He wrote 450 books on a wide range of subjects. When Cotton Mather said that the Puritan tradition in England offers a nice illustration of how a man's mind begins to make its way, one pole of thought to another, he could just as well have been making a statement about himself. He was the first of the transitional figures that would shape the American mind and experience in the 18th century.